Hi everyone, welcome to this session. So this is a recording of a presentation we've shown at some of our events. I am van den Berg, the product manager at MECAD, and I'd just like to showcase to you guys some practical uses for some of the tools in 3DExperience program. Firstly, starting with the tool called Lean Team Player, which is a meeting management tool, and then transitioning into some of the AI tools that are available within 3DExperience. So before I get started, I'd like to first describe a little bit of what's called lean methodology. So lean methodology is just something I need to outlay for you guys when it comes to the first tool we call Lean Team Player. So lean methodology is an approach to capitalize knowledge and to continuously improve business operations day to day. Now, lean methodology exists across many different industries, be that programming, manufacturing, etc. But it's based on the Toyota production system developed by Taiichi Ohno. So it actually has grounding in some real practical methods used by a very successful company and a very successful methodology by said company. Now, there's a few core things about lean methodology that I'd like to point out. First is lean methodology, as one of its principles, is client is first. Now, that doesn't always mean the client is right, but every action that the organization takes needs to go towards improving the customer experience, improving some benefit on the customer side, be that cost, quality of product, quality of service, etc. But something that's also crucially important is people are the most important in any type of system. So it doesn't help if you build methodologies and workflows that make it harder for people to do their job. So people need to be the center of a lot of the decisions and processes you put in place. Next is the idea of continuous improvement. And I think this is one of the most important things to remember about lean methodology is it's not something where you just make sweeping changes throughout a business and disrupt everything. It's a methodology based on what we call continuous improvement, meaning we make small incremental changes over time to an existing system, an existing workflow, and thus improve the business. Instead of making sweeping changes, disrupting everything, making everyone upset, we all know change is difficult, and when we do continuous improvement, it's a much more acceptable thing because people can slowly address the issues that they start seeing. And then lastly, and this is specific to what we call lean manufacturing, is shop floor. So whatever we do, it has to be grounded in what's actually happening on the shop floor. It doesn't help if we have all these wonderful ideas and we're making tools and we're making methodologies that don't actually have an impact on the shop floor or aren't implementable on the shop floor. So that is something very important to this methodology. Now, I'm going to dive into the tool called Lean Team Player. So this is a tool available via the 3DExperience platform, and it is primarily a meeting management or meeting enablement tool that allows you to take a meeting, a type of meeting you would have every day, and just more easily integrate that into the rest of your system, be that a PLM system like 3DExperience, or be that the way you log issues and track things and do project management, which I'll also show you a bit in a second. Now, the way Lean Team Player works, and you'll see it now, it mirrors a more traditional whiteboard and sticky note approach. We're all used to these tools that can be quite complicated to use, whereas this one has been simplified and not dumbed down, but just made to be more accessible to more users, because it doesn't help if it requires an entire training course to try and use these things. It needs to be fairly intuitive to most users. It links to everything else on the 3DExperience platform. So with 3DExperience, you would have your CAD data and similar things, projects, Word documents, PowerPoints, Excel on the system. And it's actually able to bring in that information, process it, attach things to that, as well as tie into other things like task management, etc. within the system. And because it's developed around lean methodology, it has been It's quite useful for certain meeting tools, but that doesn't mean if you're not using Lean, you can't use this. This is just a meeting enablement tool. So any type of meeting you might have, you can actually still make use of Lean Team Player, and any type of methodology you have within your company, you can still use. Us at MECAD, we actually use something called EOS, and this tool is actually completely usable in that type of structure. You don't need to pertain to the specific structure in question to take this further. So let me show you a quick overall view of Lean Team Player, and then we'll dive into a specific example that I'd like to take further with you guys. So one thing you'll notice, Lean Team Player has been made to work with different interfaces. Now, whether that's through a tablet, your phone, a laptop, or a huge touch screen like you see there. Now, one example of where you can use Lean Team Player is what we call a Flash 5 meeting, which is like a stand-up, very quick, very short meeting to address problems for that specific day or address specific concerns for that day. In this case, they are specifying who will be there. They're able to check who's actually online and who's available, so that they're not just trying to guess at who's going to be able to work at which spot. It's already predetermined and visible within the system. Everything is a simple drag and drop. You can write things out manually, like you see the user doing there on the touchscreen, but you can also type out items if you prefer, or if you're using a device where that's more comfortable for you. You'll see they're using different boards, and as the user drags things between those columns, it actually assigns properties to them. So you don't have to do things like right-click, open up a properties window, etc. You can actually do a lot directly just from positioning of items. So here we're doing what we call an issue creation. So we're raising an issue, and then each issue is tracked in the system, but we can also raise actions and attach the two together through something as simple as just dragging them onto each other. We go to our issue list. You'll see here's all of our issues there, and we can actually assign someone to the action to analyze the defect in the 5-axis machine. And then finally, it just allows you to better capitalize on the knowledge and know-how you have within your team. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and just show you some examples of meetings that these can be used up in. So Flash 5 meeting is type of status update meeting. Maybe you're doing stand-up meetings, etc. This can also, though, be used for things like decision-making meetings and problem-solving meetings. Again, it's a meeting enablement tool, so information sharing. So if you need to spread information throughout the team, maybe some sort of status update, or maybe you actually need to try and figure out how you're going to solve a certain problem like you would in a design and innovation meeting, you can do that as well. Now, within this tool, there's a few tool sets underneath each one. So you'll see at the top, we've seen some of these already in the previous example, but the big thing is what we call the action log and the problem log. So unlike a traditional whiteboard where when you write a sticky note, it's just a note there, that note could get lost, there's no record of all those notes. When we make a problem or we make an action in the system, it actually places those, a duplicate of them, in the action and problem log that is linked to the original item. So if the original one changes, that one changes, and we actually have one view of all of our actions and all of our problems. We can organize and make changes to these quite easily. The KPI tool is just a way of measuring KPIs, be that things like maintenance, production, products per day, or whatever it is you want to measure regularly. You can do that in the KPI tool. And then there's a bunch of preview tools. You'll see web page, 3D player, picture viewer, PDF viewer. These are all tools that allow you to open things like CAD designs, websites, videos, images, even PDFs within these tools and actually make markup on them. So if you have a CAD file and you want to say, okay, but we want to make this change, normally on a traditional whiteboard, you have to go open the CAD model in your CAD tool like SOLIDWORKS, print that out on a piece of paper, put it on the whiteboard. It's a very difficult process, where here we can do that, attach that to the action or the problem automatically. One final tool that's actually multifaceted is called the sketch tool. And that's just a general tool. It's a very open canvas in terms of what you can do. So you can sketch like you would see in that example over there, but you can actually use it in quite a few different ways. So this is actually something within the sketch tool. This is a methodology we call the 5 whys. So with this, you're actually going to be that annoying little, toddler banging on the desk saying, okay, but why? And this is a way of addressing or analyzing a problem in a way that makes it make more sense to you. So in this particular case, I'm actually going to use an example I used myself. So I'm going to say, let's say I'm late for work every day. We can start that off, and we're going to make a quick little note saying we're late for work. So we just click on our tools, we type out our message, late for work every day, and we're going to place that in the problem section in the top right. Now, let me just quickly make a change here so you guys can see that more easily. There we go. And you'll see we've placed that there. And it even attaches a little icon of my user icon next to that. So we actually know who created the problem. And that's consistent throughout the entire system. We can then ask, okay, but why am I late for work? And we ask that the first time, and we can go ahead and write that down and try and make sense of this. So for me, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm leaving home late every day. It seems quite obvious, that's why you would be late, but maybe it was traffic, maybe there was a different reason. In this case, that's the reason. But then we ask why again. Okay, but why am I leaving home late every day? So you can go, we could just duplicate that. Again, if you're using the whiteboard tools, you can just write on it. If you have a touch device, it might be a bit easier for you. Really doesn't matter which tool you prefer. But in my case, the reason why I'm leaving home every day late is because I can't find my car keys. Now we ask, why again? Why can't I find my car keys? We go ahead and we dive into that, and it's like, okay, well, if I think about it, it's because I can't remember where I put them. So this is actually a big issue, I think, actually for a lot of people. But if I don't know where I've put them, then I don't know, I can't find them the next day. We'll dive into the next one. Okay, why can't I remember where I put them? Well, that's quite obvious. When I get home, I'm tired. I don't have a specific spot to put them, so I just dump them anywhere, on the couch, on the table, on the coffee table, next to the coffee machine. Who knows? It's a huge search every morning to try and find them. So that lack of regular place is what's causing the issue for me. Now, we can actually stop here. We can actually kind of see what the solution would be, but we can take this a step further and then finalize that. So you don't have to do all of the whys. If you get to a point where you feel you understand the problem fully, you can create an action already from that. And in my case, I'm just going to say I don't have a key hook or a tray or a bowl or something to put my keys in. That's always the same place to go look for them. With that done, we've identified the core of the problem, and we can now go ahead and dive more into what actually we're going to do to try and solve this. In this case, I'm going to make an action note, and I'm going to put that in that action field. Now, what's nice is the problem would have been logged in our problem system within the 3D Lean tool, and the action would have been logged within the action dashboard. And I'm going to show you guys a bit more of that with a different problem in a second. So the sketch tool, like I said, it's an open canvas. It has many different tools. These are some of them, so I'm going to mention some of them. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but you saw the 5Y, the one here in the middle. We also have what we call the 5W2H method. So there's a saying, a problem well described is half solved, and that's very true. And we kind of saw that with the 5Y, but the 5W2H encompasses this a lot more. So we have 5 W's, so what, where, when, how, who, and then the two H's would be how and how many. So we try and figure out what is causing our issue, and as we go through all of these things, we help describe the issue better and make it easier to solve. There's also other things like what we call an Ishikawa diagram. This is actually quite well used in the manufacturing industry, but there's other methods if you prefer them, and you can even bring in your own. You don't have to use these ones. Next, we have our organizing templates. So with these are just ways of organizing data. So you'll see at the bottom things like Scrum boards, daily meetings. So these are for daily meetings, but you again can bring in your own. And finally, the last set we have is follow-up templates, similar to the two I've just mentioned. So let's take a different approach. Let's take the same problem and we'll analyze it in a bit more detail and take it a little bit further. So we'll start off with our KPI screen. Now, before we do, we start off our meeting, and it keeps track record of all the things we're doing. So we can see our maintenance KPI, suddenly we're jumping to 8 calls per week. That's actually a huge issue for us. So we're going to log a formal problem and say, okay, this is a problem. We don't have we have too much maintenance calls coming in. All of a sudden, it seems uncharacteristic for us. We can actually then make what we call a markup and take a little screen grab of the issue in question, so that when someone looks at this problem, this issue later down the line, they'll actually have the context to know what we're talking about. They might not ask, okay, but how do you know it's too much? Well, here's the actual screenshot of the maintenance KPI. We'll dive back into our 5W, our 5Y system, and from there we're going to start figuring out what this issue is. We'll start off, okay, why do we have increased maintenance calls? Well, it suddenly happened right after we delivered a new shipment to a customer and we're getting full system shutdown. So that's the type of maintenance call we're getting, which is actually quite critical for us. We can't have that happen to our customers. We make water jet cutters. They can't have things just shut down and have production be slowed down. Well, why is that happening? Well, some initial investigation is showing that our controller boards are overheating. Why are the controller boards overheating then? Well, the customer is actually in a different location from many of our other customers, so it's actually significantly warmer in their workshop compared to environments we've dealt with before. And then lastly, if we ask, okay, well, why is that an issue still? Well, we have a lack of ventilation or lack of cooling within the system that prevents us from making sure everything's working as expected. So already on the fourth one, we've basically identified the problem. We have a lack of ventilation or cooling of the controller board in the system. So we're going to make an action for that. It's going to be our next step. And we're going to make sure we add additional ventilation or adjust the ventilation for the controller board. There are other ways we could address this. It doesn't have to be that specific one, but we've now linked the two together so that when we look at the problem, we can see there's already an action there. So we go to our problem board. We can see all the problems on the left-hand side. And if we go to our action board, here's our action. So you'll note when we drag it into specific fields, it actually sets properties like the urgency, where it falls in terms of our weekly plan, when is it planned, when are we going to do it. And we can actually change the view of that board depending on what we want. So if we want to see things like the CAD file, for instance, we can go to the 3D playboard, drag in our CAD file, and now we're going to actually have a look at this in 3D. And again, this is a browser-based tool, so it doesn't matter which device you're doing this on, be it a tablet, a Mac, Windows PC, or even one of those smart whiteboards. You can actually use this in very different environments. It doesn't really matter what you have available to you. So we're going to highlight where the ventilation is, and we just want to increase maybe the sizing of the fans or increase the number of fans. Add a little note there. You can even add some sticky notes and some stickers that might add some additional information, just express some sort of intent. And you can go from there and adjust things like templates for the text color, etc. So we're going to place this just next to this. And we're quite happy with that. We're going to take the little screenshot and add that to our actions. We go back to our action, go to context, add the specific context we're looking for, and we're quite happy there. So we're now going to type in some additional information here because we want to push this to a different system. We've identified what we want to do, we've identified the problem, we've added context. We now need to push it to the actual person who's going to do the work. So we're going to create what we call a collaborative task. And this is where the tie-in between this system and the rest of the 3D experience becomes apparent. Collaborative tasks come with the base level of 3D experience, which many of you might have after the 1 July changes. So this is actually something that's quite useful and is already available to you, those collaborative tasks. So we'll go a little bit into what that looks like. So we're done with Lean Team Player. We're now moving over to the project planning section of things. So this is a browser-based project planning tool. It doesn't require the people that are going to do the tasks to have access to the tool though. So they can have their base 3D experience platform and the project planner can assign tasks to them regardless of what they might be, or what access they might have, or what apps or experience they might have. They don't need special skills to try and use these tools. It integrates with everything in 3D experience, be that simulation, CAD, manufacturing, even Office documents which can be uploaded, etc. And when I mean integrate, that means it can pull and reference from them. So if you give someone a task, make me a drawing, for instance, you can give them the file, the CAD file, the assembly, the part that they need to make the drawing from. When they complete the task, they can add the drawing as a deliverable on the task. So it's not unclear where to find these files. It's linked directly to the exact file in the PLM system. It's not a copy of something, so it's actually quite easy to manage these things. And like I mentioned, it integrates to the PLM system automatically. So if a file gets a revision, those sorts of things pull through on the task side. So we're going to jump over to the tasks first. So tasks is an interface that the users will generally use. And if you click on a task, you can see all the information there. We can see which parent project it's in. In this case, it's not associated with one. So I'm going to do the project planner a favor and quickly associate that with the correct project. Our waterjet cutter V2 project, and adjust the urgency there in a second. And then I'm going to do some estimation here. So I think it's going to take 3 days plus or minus 1 day. And I'm going to add in the CAD file as well to the task so that I know the context I need to be working in, that I'm working with the right revision and the right design. You'll also note there's a deliverable field that I can use as well if I want to add something else. If I save that, to start the task, it's as simple as moving it to the in work column, and the task is already started in the system. Now you'll note here's our project planning page, and here we can see a Gantt chart of the entire project. We can reference other projects, we can have sub-projects, but there's the particular task I've made in this case that I want to make use of. Now in this case, it's just thrown it to the start of the project. That's just how the system works. What we can actually do is we can adjust that to the current date. So when I first made this was back in February. We're just going to quickly set it to that. And you'll see that updates and shifts to the end, and it actually adjusts the length of the total project based on that. Now, I mentioned we can have sub-projects and what we call sub-tasks. So there you see a big example of that. And what's nice is, in order to make a task shorter or longer or adjust its estimation, you can just drag the task smaller and it'll set the end date for that task automatically for you, and the rest of the things update with that. So there's actually quite a few tools like this you can use within the task planner. You can change the type of view you see. So this is a timeline view. You can do what we call a data grid view, where you see a bit more information, what's the duration of each task, or who's assigned to it, what's the priority, etc. And we can also switch to a Kanban view like earlier. Now, if someone moves a task from to do to in work, it'll actually update the start and end date for that task, especially when they complete it as well. So the actual duration would be shown in the project planning tool, not just the guessed or the estimated duration. Now, the final thing I want to show you is just the dashboard for the project planner. There's a saying that you can have a lot of data, but that doesn't mean you actually have information. And information is what's actually useful to us. Just because we have the data in the back end doesn't mean it's useful information. And this is something that converts all that data we have into useful information. So you can see we have what's going on with our milestones. In this case, we don't have milestones set in the project, but we can obviously add those. We have tasks, and we can actually see what the state of the tasks are. So we see there's 9 total tasks. 3 of them are in work and the rest are in the to-do stage, and I can actually click and hover over them to see a bit more information. I can go to the task risk assessment side, see which tasks are late, which are close to being late, or which have no risk at all. You can see how the tasks change over time, as well as who's been assigned to what and how we're using our resources over time. Maybe we're overtaxing them a certain week. Maybe we need to reduce other workloads within that week because it's a critical week for the project, or maybe we just need to shift some things around as well. Now, from a SOLIDWORKS user perspective, I've shown you interfaces you might not be familiar with. So all of the tools I've shown you are accessible from SOLIDWORKS. So the task planning, we can actually access that from in SOLIDWORKS. So you'll have a pane on the right-hand side that you can use, and this will give you access to pretty much all the tools within 3DExperience. Sometimes it might open up the web browser for you, but many of the tools open up directly in SOLIDWORKS. So if we look at the collaborative tasks, you'll see I have a ton of tasks in this. So I'm just going to filter some of them out, and I'm going to open up the task in question here where I need to add ventilation. You can see I can actually open up the CAD file directly from here. So if I don't know where the CAD file is, I don't know what it's called, I don't have to go search for it. I can just right-click open or even drag and drop into SOLIDWORKS. Now, to make the design changes, I need to make a new revision of the assembly. In SOLIDWORKS with 3DExperience, that's as simple as right-click, new revision, and it generates a new revision. We can just add a quick revision comment there. And we're going to enhance the cooling system. And I'm not going to bore you guys with seeing the CAD changes, but I think this makes it quite clear how to use this type of system to enhance everything. So from the CAD user's perspective, they just have a quick task, they get a pop-up saying the task has been assigned to you, they can manage all of that within SOLIDWORKS, and then the project planner doesn't need access to install tools like SOLIDWORKS. They can even access everything from their phone and store assigned tasks and be involved in the project, be able to view the CAD files from 3DExperience, and then get information from teams that might be encountering some of the issues like we had with Lean Team Player and the maintenance team. So we've said a lot in the past that 3DExperience is an expansive system, and we can take this even further. So first of all, this might have been raised formally as an issue within our system in the issue tracking system. This is included with the base level of 3DExperience. Issue management's there by default. You just need to set it up and make sure you have training regarding that. But this is something that could have been done without any additional roles being purchased. It's included with the cloud services. Next step is change management. So change management is a little bit of a beast in and of itself, but the reason for that is change management is something that's often required either by regulatory requirements, often in the medical industry or similar industries, or it might just be something that your organization takes quite seriously because you don't want changes just to happen. You want those changes to be tracked and track the reason why they're happening. So we can do things like log an issue and generate what we call a change action directly from that, or there's all sorts of steps in between. Depending on where you fall on that spectrum, you might need additional roles like the change management role, but you can do change actions and issues automatically without any additional roles as well and grow into those larger roles at a later stage. So it's a very modular system, and I think this is something we've tried to emphasize a lot. Now next, we can take things further as well with what we call advanced BOM management. Now, the bill of material or BOM you get from SOLIDWORKS is not always exactly how it's manufactured on the floor. What might be one single welded designed part in SOLIDWORKS is 5 or 6 different components that need to go for machining before being welded and combined into a single part. And that's not always present within the bill of material or what we call the engineering bill of material you get from SOLIDWORKS. So we can manage the engineering bill of material within 3DExperience, adding items, adjusting quantities, etc. Even adding items like clues, consumables, and so forth. But there's something more that's called manufacturing bill of material management. And in that case, we can actually take the engineering bill of material and modify and split items and combine items however we need and get notified when these things actually change as well. So it'll give us a nice blinking light saying, hey, your manufacturing bill of material is out of date because this component specifically is affecting these items in your manufacturing bill of material. So quite a lot of powerful tools within the 3DExperience data management side of things. Now, a lot of this is very data management centric, and if you're a CAD user, that's maybe not always the most fascinating or attractive things for you. So what I'm actually going to show you next are going to be more applicable to the CAD designer side. Some of the AI tools being developed and coming into the 3DExperience SOLIDWORKS portfolio. So there's always been a joke around AI, and it's actually changed a little bit in the last few years, but the joke's always been, people are scared that AI is going to take over, and then AI will identify 2 Labradors as cats with a 98% level of confidence. So it's always a joke in the AI system, but these kinds of jokes have actually changed. Now the joke's not, AI is going to take over and AI is anemic, but more, if you're not doing 13 jobs using ChatGPT and various AI tools, are you even working at all? That's the kind of thing that's been changing and things have been shifting to. And that just kind of gives us an idea. AI has now changed from something we mock for it not being strong enough to we're mocking people for not maybe even using it to its full extent. Now, On the AI side of things, before I dive into the examples, maybe let me put some things in context for you where we are on the AI revolution spectrum and where the things are. So let's talk about the things we already know about. This is called general computing, and these are things like Excel, for example. So previously, we had to sit with a piece of paper and we manually calculated each line, 1 times 2, 2 times 2, 3 times 3. We did that by hand for each single one. With things like general computing, we were able to automate those sorts of things. We type it once, we automate the calculation for multiple multiplications or any type of calculation you want to do. And that's kind of where CAD sits at the moment. CAD is mostly in the general computing sense. It doesn't do any thinking or automation for you, but it does automate basic tasks that you ask it to do. Now, the next step up from that is what we call function-specific AI. And this is pretty much where we are today. So function-specific AI would be ChatGPT, Midjourney, Google's Bard, whatever you want to look at today, most of it falls under function-specific AI. It's bred around a specific function and it's created around that function and it's meant to address that thing. So with ChatGPT, it is a text generator. It is a very cool and very powerful form of autocomplete, and essentially it can help you automate things like summarize this document for me, or summarize this email that I've received here, or help me write this in a different tone, or judge a certain thing under a certain criteria. That's where we are today, and that's where most of the tools I'm going to show you today are at. This is mostly neural networks. Now, the next step up is what we call general intelligence AI. So this is now where AI starts actually understanding context a little better, and we start programming in more into it. Now, there's not a lot of work in general intelligence AI at the moment, at least nothing that most of us would have access to, but that is kind of where we're slowly building up to, and we're kind of reaching, I wouldn't say the top end of function-specific AI, but we're edging towards general AI with some of the tools today, and they're only going to get more powerful. And that's something we can look at in future. Now, super intelligent AI is sort of the next step. This is now where AI has more intelligence than you or I would. Now, intelligence is a very difficult word to summarize these kinds of tools in, but essentially what that would mean is general intelligence AI, you ask it, hey, can you make me a bracket between these two components? Super intelligent AI would be powerful enough to generate an entire Sassel plant for you, and then on top of that, give you all the drawings, maybe even give you simulations along with that to verify everything it's done. So that is kind of where people ask, hey, can I ask this? Is there going to be a SOLIDWORKS tool that generates my design for me? You're kind of in between those top two. And unfortunately, in the AI field, we're not there yet. But we can still make use of AI at the moment. So that's where these tools come in. So within the SOLIDWORKS Cloud CAD package, there's a few different things we can look at. And maybe before I just jump into that, I can just highlight some of the AI tools we've already used. Many of you have maybe used Midjourney or ChatGPT or Bard, or there's currently 1 million of them sprouting each day. But something you probably already use on your phone is what we call sectioning. So in this case, you'll see a photo's been taken, and it can actually identify different sections of the photo and separate them out. I know you can just take a photo, and if there's someone in the photo, you can actually just crop them out, paste them in a different photo automatically. You don't have to try and point out what is the outline. The AI tools automatically define that. So let's look at what we can do going forward. So CAD stands for computer aided design, but what if we changed what aid mean? Aid meant. Instead of it just being calculate the volume of the cube I've drawn, maybe help me in designing the things I do. So there are some tools in 3DExperience that allow us to do that. The tools are called Design Assistant as a collection, and these are those specific ones. So there's Selection Assistant. I'll go into the specifics of what these mean in a second. So Selection Assistant, Mate Helper, Sketch Helper, and Smart Mate, which is actually one of the newer ones in this lineup. So let's start with Selection Helper. So let's say this little gear you see there at the bottom with all those teeth, I want to add a fillet to each one of those. Now, normally I would have to go click, 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 oops, I select a face instead of an edge, start over, click, 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 click. I think there's something like 280 edges in there, so that's going to be quite a painful process to do. But with AI tools within 3DExperience, we can actually use these tools to our advantage. Now, first of all, these tools actually learn how you work. They're not just static tools. So the more you work, the more you use these things, the better they become at predicting what you want to do. So you'll see here as we edit that part, if we select an edge and we select the Smart Suggestion Design Assistant tool, it actually highlights all the other similar edges in this group. And what you can do is you can actually change the suggestions, either by selecting more edges so that it starts including, maybe you want these edges that are maybe shorter, cut by the hole. You can do that. Or you can say, okay, but let's look at edges at different angles, etc. You can adjust what the scope of what it's looking at automatically. Another example is doing the same but with circular edges. So in this case, we want to add chamfers to these edges at the top. You select one of the edges, hit the Design Assistant tool, and it actually suggests very similar edges and even ones at angles on different features. So these are not all on the same feature. Some of them are on different cut extrudes. Let's say these heatsink fins, we want to do the same. So we start at the bottom, we add a chamfer there, and you'll note it starts off only selecting the bottom edges. As soon as we click on another edge as well that's similar to others we want, it also highlights those as well, and we get a much more appropriate suggestion than we would have just gotten had we just selected similar edges or edges in the same feature. So that's the selection helper tool. The next tool is called the mate helper, and this is a very fancy way of copying mates and copying components throughout a system. So all we can do is we select our particular component. We don't have to go into the mate tool. We just hit the smart mate or mate helper tool, and it actually suggests similar places to place the certain component with similar mates, which it'll add automatically. Now, on top of that, you can do this in SOLIDWORKS at the moment with something called feature-based mates or feature-based patterns for components. This is much more than that. So if all of those holes, each one was their own extrude cut feature, it would still give us the same result because it's not analyzing features. It is to some extent, but it's also analyzing the geometry. So we can adjust this so it also does the same for the bottom sections as well and mates the component in place. Maybe this is a good example to showcase some of that. So in this case, you can see we have two type of mates there on the left-hand side, a coincident and a concentric mate for this gear we have over here. So we're going to copy this. We're going to click on the component itself. We're going to select our mate tool there, Design Assistance with Mate Creation. And it's going to automatically start off by suggesting the two other similar pins in this lineup. So that's great, but this is actually a type of more complex gear setup. So we can do things like exclude certain portions of the mate. So if we click on that top portion there, you'll note we can exclude that, or we can exclude some of the specific mates in terms of make that one rotatable, for instance. We can then, if we want to pattern this to the lower portions, we can actually select those edges as well, and it'll do the exact same type of feature analysis and understanding of where we want to place these components. And as soon as we hit OK, it automatically does mate creation for that. This is not a type of pattern. This is a type of actual component copying and mate creation all built into one. So it's not a weird circular or mate-driven pattern. It's much more than that. There you see, we've patterned this to all the other components. Now the next one is the sketch helper, and this is actually, I think, one of the more powerful ones in the system. The next one is also very cool, and I think something people will want to use more and more. But the sketch helper does a lot of intelligent things in the back end. You guys will see in a second. So if we start a sketch on this face, and we put a circle in one of the corners, if we ask the design assistant to help us with this, with the sketch helper, it's going to select similar corners that it wants to put them to. We didn't add dimensions, we didn't add references, it just bases it exactly on its distance from similar geometry. You can do the same on a different part and you'll see the results are also very similar. Maybe in some cases we'd only do top right corners. So if we keep asking it, hey, maybe just change this, it's going to start learning that's the way we work and it's going to suggest things more in line with what we usually do. and we can obviously change those suggestions as needed. The last one is called Smart Mates. So there is a similarly named feature within SOLIDWORKS. This one's actually a little bit different in terms of how it works. So I only have the one example, as this is a fairly new feature, but I can show you a little bit of how this works. So what we do is we start off by moving our component into the rough position we want it at. We can then go select the component and select the Mate Assistant tool. What it's going to do is it's going to firstly create mates for that component. That component wasn't mated initially, so it's going to look at components close to it and start adding those mates in place, as well as look at similar faces and similar edges that it can mate duplicates of that component as well. So it's actually like a combination of the mate helper. It's just made it even more powerful. You don't have to create the mates beforehand. It'll actually add them in for you automatically. And that's it. That's the set of design tools. Apologies, this is the next slide for one of my colleagues' presentations. But I hope what I've shown you today will give you some excitement and at least some understanding of some of the tools within 3DExperience. If at any point you have questions, you can always reach out to us at MECAD. But I hope this has been educational and that you've taken at least some understanding of the broader 3DExperience system from this. Thank you so much.